Okay, last week, so we'll do the bottom first and then the top. Last week, we were supposed to get to this and we didn't because of time, so we'll get to where we let off at. Remember, Jesus has just healed the man by the pool of Bethesda who's been has been crippled for 38 years. All right, and then, of course, now we're going to get to the reaction. A lot of verses here, so we'll take them few by few, 16 to 47. So he's healed the man. And all the Pharisees are so happy for him that the man hasn't walked for 40 days. No, that's right, they're not happy for him. They're mad because Jesus healed him on Sunday. All right. Verse 16. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. What did he do? Rob somebody, steal, take somebody's property? No, he healed a man who'd been crippled for 38 years. You can see the frustration with the religious leaders. But Jesus answered them, My Father worketh hitherto, and I work. Therefore the Jews sought the more to kill him, because he had not only broken the Sabbath, but said also that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. So that really, got him going then. That's one of the first things we do here. Jesus points to his divinity, that he is God. Then answered Jesus, said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he seeth the Father do. For what things soever he doeth, these also doeth the Son likewise. For the Father loveth the Son, and showeth him all things that himself doeth, and he will show him greater works than these, that ye may marvel. For as the Father raiseth up the dead, and quickeneth them, even so the Son quickeneth whom he will. For the Father judgeth no man, but hath committed all judgment unto the Son. So Jesus is making bold claims here. A lot of people in today's world like to have respect for Jesus and group him into a category of great person, great moral teacher. But he is making some extreme claims here. He's basically saying he is God walking in human flesh. All right, unless you are God, that's not a good person. You're either a fraud or you're the real deal. And that's something, so when people, if I ever say to you, I believe he's a good teacher or a good person to pattern life after, so do you think it's a good person who claims to be God and isn't? So you have to cause him to make a decision there. Verse 23, that all men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. He that honoreth not the Son, honoreth not the Father, which hath sent him. So Jesus just used the Father and Son like they're together, entwined, all throughout eternity. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that heareth my word, and believeth on him that hath sent me, hath everlasting life, and shall not come into condemnation, but is passed from death unto life. So he's making the statement, if you believe my words, you have eternal life. That's a strong claim to make. I also want to point out again, he says in verse 25, Verily, verily, I say unto you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear it shall live. He's saying, hear my voice, and even the dead shall live. So this is kind of the things that are unique to John. Remember the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, Luke, they're kind of the same stories from different perspectives. John is showing, he's not contradicting any of them. He's just bringing out different stories and a lot of the words of Jesus and showing Jesus claimed to be God and is God. Also, I want to point out that verily, verily, I say unto you. I remember I heard it was Reinhard Bunke say it one time. So what did the Old Testament prophets say? They would, when they have a message, Isaiah or Jeremiah or Ezekiel, they say, thus saith the Lord. And then they give the message. What does Jesus say? Verily, I say unto you. So he wasn't saying, thus saith the Lord, because he was the Lord. And he had all authority. So what he said was fully truthful and accurate. Verse 26, For as the Father hath life in himself, so hath he given to the Son to have life in himself, and hath given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man. Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming, in the which all that are in the grave shall hear his voice, and shall come forth, they that have done good into the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil into the resurrection of damnation. So Jesus is getting a little bit of a foretaste of the future resurrection, because there's not a whole lot of material about that in the Old Testament, in which, remember, this time period when Jesus is here, that's all that they have. I can of mine own self do nothing as I hear. I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of the Father which has sent me. If I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. There is another that beareth witness of me, and I know that the witness which he witnessed of me is true. Ye send unto John, and he bare witness unto the truth. So he's talking about John the Baptist here. But I received not testimony from man, but these things I say, that ye might be saved. He was a burning and a shining light, and you were willing for a season to rejoice in his light. So he's pointing to the ministry of John the Baptist, how he was the foreshadower, the one who would point the way to Jesus. And he goes on to say, but I have a greater witness than that of John, for the works which the Father hath given me to finish, the same works that I do, bear witness of me that the Father hath sent me. And the Father himself which hath sent me hath borne witness of me. Ye have neither heard his voice at any time, nor seen his shape, and ye have not his word abiding in you, for whom he hath sent, him you believe not. So you can imagine, when he says these things to the religious leaders of that day, they really, based on what we have here, had an arrogance to them, a holier than thou attitude. You know, they viewed themselves as righteous people. And when this person who really hasn't been formally trained in school comes to them and tells them, what do you say here? You have neither heard his voice at any time nor seen his shape. You can imagine they're just getting even more mad. And as we read these stories, we can see a 3-year buildup of the religious leaders coming against them, because they, in the end, they were the ones who took Jesus down, but only because he allowed it. Then he closes out this section here. Search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me. So he's saying the Old Testament has already been pointing to me for thousands of years, and you've missed it. And you were not to come to me that you might have life. I receive not honor from men, but I know you, that you have not the love of God in you. I am come in my Father's name, and you receive me not. If another shall come in his own name, him you will receive. How can you believe which receive honor one of another, and seek not the honor that cometh from God only? Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one that accuses you, even Moses, in whom you trust. So he's saying your own law, the writings of Moses, that they almost worship at that time, they will be the things that will judge them for their violating. For had you believed Moses, you would have believed me, for he wrote of me. But if you believe not his writings, how shall you believe my words? All right, just think of the statement Jesus made in that long passage. It said Moses wrote about him and his father. God is his father. You know, saying he's equal with God. So he's making very strong claims here, but he's also doing many wonderful miracles backing him up. So it seems like the common folk, the sinners, the people who are outcast in society are loving and believing and following him, and the religious leaders, with a few exceptions, we think of Nicodemus or Joseph Arimathea, are betraying against him and not believing him, getting angrier and angrier. And I imagine they're kind of plotting together. How can we bring him down, take him out, and end this? So that concludes that section in John. Then we're going to go down here to Matthew, and we're going to talk about picking grain. Again, another thing on the Sabbath. They were big on violating the Sabbath. I was working one Monday morning at the store, and this guy said, I cut grass yesterday. I said, well, you have been in my mom's book. I said her biggest 3 sins were murder, adultery, and cutting grass on Sunday. Well, the religious leaders, they had very strict rules back then too. And the disciples are on a Sabbath one day are hungry. All right, we'll look at all 3 versions and see if we point any differences in them. First, Matthew's account, Matthew 12, 1-8. At that time, Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were hungry and began to pluck the ears of corn and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto him, just looking for something to do wrong, Behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath day. But he said unto them, have ye not read what David did when he was 100, and they that were with him, how he entered into the house of God, and did eat the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, neither for them which were with him, but only for the priests? Or have ye not read in the law how that on the Sabbath day the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? But I say unto you that in this place is one greater than the temple. There's another strong claim about himself. But if you had known what this meaneth, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath day. He refers back to the time of David. If you remember the story, David and his men are starving, no food anywhere, and they go to that temple and ask for the bread that's consecrated for the Lord. And, he's allowed to take it. Of course, it later will cost that priest and his family their life, as Saul would come and destroy them. So the point was being, it's not the food in itself that's sacred, it's what it stands for, and the need of the human outweighs that. Mark has the same story. Mark 2, we'll look see if anything is added to it, 23 to 28. A little bit more abbreviated version. Usually when we have a story in Matthew and Mark, Matthew has a little more, and again, not always, and we know Mark's a shorter book too. I told you my opinion, Matthew wrote it first, but if tradition is right and Mark wrote it first, perhaps Matthew took Mark's version and said, since I was an eyewitness, let me give more details to it. All right, Mark 2, 23 to 28. And it came to pass that he went through the cornfields on the Sabbath day, and his disciples began as they went to pluck ears of corn. The Pharisees said unto him, behold, why do they on the Sabbath day that which is not lawful? And he said unto them, have you never read what David did when he had need and was 100, he and they that were with him? I went to the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and did eat the showbread, which is not lawful to eat for the priest, and gave also to them which were with him. And he said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. Many people respect and honor the Sabbath day, which I believe you should, or we celebrate now the Lord's Day, which is Sunday. The Sabbath in the Old Testament was Saturday. I think most people just think because the Lord rose that day and the church began to celebrate a separate day than the Jewish counterparts. The important thing, Paul says, is to esteem no one day another. Just make sure you take one day to rest and reflect on God. For most of us, that is Sunday when we relax, when we go to church and things of that nature. But the point being, it points back to creation. God created the world in 6 days, and after the last saying, he didn't say, boy, am I tired, I need a day off. He made the Sabbath for us, and Jesus emphasized that point. You weren't made for the Sabbath day. The Sabbath was made for you. In other words, don't worship it. This is almost what they're doing here, and we'll see that in their next couple of miracles. Let's look at the account in one more place. Luke 6, 1 to 5. And it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first that he went through the cornfields, and his disciples picked the ears of corn and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. So this is not like corn like we do. I think it's like ears of grain, and shows that they're living from meal to meal. If something that minimal is giving you relief from your hunger. Certain of the Pharisees said to them, why do you that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath day? It's almost like they're hovering around looking for them to do something wrong. And Jesus answering them said, have you not read so much as this, what David did when he himself was 100, and they which were with him? So many times when they accuse him, and Jesus will point to an example in the Old Testament, and they have nothing to say. I went to the house of God, and did eat the showbread, and gave also to them that were with him, which it is not lawful to eat, but for the priests alone. He said unto them that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. And it came to pass also on another's, that's it. All right, one quick note here for those of you who will watch The Chosen Season 2. This is a very big story in that season. They will not only address this story here, but they'll have a flashback to the time of King David when he did this. Also, one more note on this. Have you ever listened to someone in a sermon, maybe on YouTube or something, and they're going for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden they'll say, then how can you say you love the Lord when you don't observe his true day of worship? And then you get right away, you go, oh, it's Seventh Day Adventist. It seems like they have an obsession with the Sabbath day, and they seem to, whenever I listen to them, they emphasize that more than evangelism. It's almost like that. So that's what we should not make the Sabbath. We should observe it, or observe the Lord's day, but not make it an idol, which it seems like these religious leaders have done. And that takes us to the next story, when Jesus heals the withered hand on the Sabbath. We'll go to Matthew 12. You remember, this is first century Palestine. You have an affliction like this, you have it for life, and you're done with it. You can't, most 99% of the people aren't living with their hands, so he's basically useless, or has one hand, is greatly handicapped, and here the Lord's going to do something great. So everyone should be happy. A person's healed, but not the case. Matthew 12:9. And when he was departed thence, he went into their synagogue, and behold, there was a man which had his hand withered, and they asked him, saying, so Jesus is already knowing what they're thinking, so he's setting the stage before he even heals a person. He says, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days? That they might accuse him. And he said unto them, what man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? So he knows everyone in there, the most religious, the most observant person, if he woke up the morning of the Sabbath and one of his animals had fell in the ditch, he would not hesitate to go out and do that, which is work, which is physical thing. But the thing is, it's an important need, and it overrides the rule of the Sabbath. And he says to them, they'll do that for an animal. Verse 12, how much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath day. Then saith he to the man, stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole, like as the other. Then the Pharisees went out and held a council against him, how they might destroy him. Almost jokingly said, then the Pharisees greatly rejoiced, said, Jesus, you made a good point, and we're so happy for this man whose life has changed forever. Talk about miserable, bitter people. They must have been, so Robbie won't have to edit the tape. They must have been a member of a certain political party. We'll let you pick which one, because they sound very like him. They don't want to hear anything good. They just want to hear misery and complaining and nothing good happening. Mark 3:1-6. I want to point something different here that he says. Same story. And he entered again into the synagogue, and there was a man there which had a withered man. And Mark adds here, and they watched him whether he would heal him on the Sabbath day, that they might accuse him. So they're actually hoping Jesus would heal him, not for the poor man's sake, just so they'd have another case to come against him. And he said unto the man which had the withered hand, stand forth. And he saith unto him, again, here's the example given, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath day, or to do evil, to save life, or to kill? But they held their peace, and when he had looked round about on them with anger, so even the Lord got angry. So anger is not wrong if it's justifiable. If Jesus can get angry, we can get angry. But the thing is, how does he react when he's angry? Remember, of all the people on earth who's ever walked the planet, he's the only one who could literally took his finger, lightning bolts, and disintegrated everyone in front of them. But he doesn't do that. Being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he saith unto the man, stretch forth thine hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other. And the Pharisees went forth, and straightway took counsel with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. So he does a great work, and they take against him. Back to the lightning bolt thing. How many of us have ever wished we could have done that? I think of road rage, of complete strangers, or I think of obnoxious customers. But how many also a day later said, I'm glad I did not have lightning bolts in my hand, and destroyed them and mess my life up for the rest of the life. So, but who brings out the Lord's anger? Not the sinners, the religious leaders. All right, one more account, Luke's account in Luke 6. 6 to 11, and it'll basically be the same thing. And as we read each, usually it's always Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Sometimes it's just two of them. I want you to point out how they're all similar, probably tracing back to one source, which I believe to be Matthew. Others believe to be the mysterious Q document. And it came to pass also on another Sabbath that he entered into the synagogue and taught, and there was a man whose right hand was withered, so it doesn't give all the introductions, the other one. And the scribes and the Pharisees watched him whether he would heal on the Sabbath day, that they might find an accusation against him. But he knew their thoughts, and said to the man which had withered hand, Rise up, stand forth in the midst. And he arose and stood forth. Another thing showing Jesus as God, said he knew what they were thinking. So even before this is going on, he's understanding and knowing what's going on in his mind. And then reading out the story again. Then said Jesus unto them, I will ask you one thing, is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it? And looking around upon them all, he said unto the man, Stretch forth thy hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored whole as the other. And they were filled with madness, and communed one with another what they might do to Jesus. Filled with madness, literally driving him crazy because Jesus healed a person. So that's who he's dealing with. Kind of a theme here as we're doing this. People have studied these Gospels for centuries, and this is the timeline, the chronological events that they're putting together. So the three consecutive stories: Jesus heals a man by the pool of Bethesda on the Sabbath, disciples picking grain on the Sabbath, and finally he's healing a withered man with a withered hand on the Sabbath. And the aggravation is building among the Jewish leaders. The Messiah they prayed for centuries is here, walking with them, and they don't even recognize it. Not only do they not recognize him, they're actually hostile against him. Next, Jesus, just generic passage, heals many in Galilee. And I mentioned most of these stories are Matthew, Mark, Luke. This is one that is only Matthew and Mark. Let me show you one difference of the two accounts. And they'll remember what I said about Matthew in the beginning. Matthew 12, 15 to 21. Oh, this was right after the previous story. Matthew 12, 14. Yes, right after he's healed the man with the withered hand. But when Jesus knew it, he withdrew himself from thence, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them all, and charged them that they should not make him known, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, so now, remember Matthew said Matthew was written to a Jewish audience, so every time Jesus does something that's fulfilled in the Old Testament, he'll quote a passage, and from Isaiah he quotes, Behold my servant, whom I have chosen, my beloved, in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he shall show judgment to the Gentiles. Also, I'll point out there, God talking about Jesus and putting his spirit upon him. So you see all three members of the Trinity, and he's quoting Isaiah. So the triune God is kind of veiled reference in the Old Testament. As we get to the New Testament, we're more made aware of the revelation of the Trinity, one God in three persons. Still quoting Isaiah, he shall not strive nor cry, neither shall any man hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed shall he not break, and smoking flax shall he not quench, till he send forth judgment unto victory, and in the name of the Gentiles trust. Maybe Jewish people heard about the life of Jesus. Matthew writes this account and passes it around, and then people are reading verse after verse in the Old Testament, beginning in Matthew 1, where he's, gives us the line of Abraham and the virgin birth and all these things. They're saying he must truly is the Messiah. Not only did he do great things, he fulfilled these things that were spoken of in the Old Testament prophecies about him. Mark has the same story, in chapter 3. He had some details, and he does not include the passage from Isaiah. Remember, Matthew's writing to a Jewish audience. Mark is writing to a Gentile audience who would not be as moved as Jesus fulfilling Old Testament prophecies. Probably writing to Christians at Rome. So Mark 3:7-12. But Jesus withdrew himself with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea. And we don't think about this, but now, even though this was a day of any kind of, but no other communication but word of mouth, when he's always doing all these miracles, he's sure spreading around, and people are just coming from everywhere and following him. And from Jerusalem, and from Idumea, and from beyond Jordan, they about Tyre and Sidon, a great multitude, when they had heard what great things he did, came unto him. And he spake to his disciples that a small ship should wait on him because of the multitude, lest they should throng him. This is added to, that's not in the passage of Matthew here. For he had healed many, insomuch that they pressed upon him for to touch him, and as many had had plagues and unclean spirits, when they saw him, fell down before him and cried, saying, Thou art the Son of God. And he straitly charged them that they should not make him known. So Matthew doesn't add that count. Mark adds this. People are just touching his garment. People with demon possessions are just screaming and crying before him because God is literally walking in front of them. I'm sure this is making an impression on all the people. And finally, we're going to close out this week with, this one by one, he's been selecting them, but I'm going to go into the three passages of Matthew, Mark, and Luke that gives the disciples' list. And then we're going to briefly go over all 12 of them, maybe point out a couple things you didn't know. So Matthew 10 is the first to list the 12 disciples. Sometimes they have different names, and we'll go over that. 2-4. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these: the first Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the publican or sinner, or tax collector, what he's saying there, James the son of Alphaeus, and Labius, whose surname was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. Mark 3. Let's see if there's any differences in the names. Matthew and Mark, I believe, are the most similar list. Mark 3:13. And he goeth into a mountain, and calleth unto him who he would, and they came unto him. And he ordained 12, that they should be with him, that he might send them forth to preach, and to have power to heal sickness, and to cast out devils. And here's the list again. Simon, he's surnamed Peter. And then he skips Andrew first. And James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James. They were kind of the main three, Peter, James, and John. And he has surnamed them Boanerges, which is the sons of thunder. Then they go back to Andrew here. Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. Doesn't list Thaddeus' surname Labius here. And Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, which also betrayed him, and they went into the house. And then finally, Luke's list. Luke 6:12-16. John doesn't have a list of disciples. Once again, Matthew, Mark, Luke, similar stories. Came to pass in those days that he went out to a mountain to pray, and continued all night in prayer to God. When it was day, he called unto him his 12 disciples, and of them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. Also seems like Jesus prayed the night before this decision. So Jesus is fully God, but he's also fully man. So he has some limitations. So he has to do the things that we as believers do, like pray and seek the Lord in prayer. And during this time when he's walking here on earth. And after a night of prayer, he selects his 12. And here they are listed again: Simon, whom he also named Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon called Zelotes, and Judas the brother of James. And so it's two different Judases here. Judas, it's also the one that's known as Thaddeus. And one other point in John, it will say, and Judas, not Iscariot when he's talking, and Judas Iscariot, which also was a traitor. In this list, Luke calls him Matthew, I want to point out, but when Luke gives the story of Matthew's conversion, he calls him Levi. So it means he's going by both names. So let's go over the 12. These are the inner circle of three, Peter, James, and John. If you look, I remember when I was a kid, there was this space show called Battle of the Planets, and it was 5 characters, and they would say transmit, and they turn into these superheroes, and they have one number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, based on their order of importance. If Jesus gave them 12 shirts with 1 through 12, I'm thinking always Peter gets number 1, and either James or John 2 and 3 together. They're the ones he took in when Jairus' daughter's healed. They were with him in the Transfiguration when they saw Moses and Elijah. So Peter, his name's Simon. Jesus gives him this name, Peter, for the rock, Petrus, and his brother is Andrew. Andrew actually takes Jesus to Peter, and he, like Philip, was a disciple of John the Baptist. So we have two sets of brothers here, and James and John are the other set. They're both the sons of Zebedee. They're nicknamed the sons of thunder. James is the first disciple to be martyred. We read it in Acts how Herod has him put to death, and John, and on the other hand, John is the last one to die. So of course Judas died before James because he hung himself and was replaced by Matthias. But so James is the first martyred, and John is the only one who's not martyred. Lives out his days, writes the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Revelation. So these first 4, we think of the 3. Now the others: Philip, disciple of John the Baptist; Bartholomew, also known as Nathaniel, and John, who's Nathaniel. He's the one Jesus said, before Philip came and called you under the fig tree, I knew thee. So he's a very devout religious follower, and the Lord perceived that for him. So that's Bartholomew. Thomas, Didymus means twin, so he might have had a twin brother. This is famous Doubting Thomas, the one who didn't believe until Thomas's. 8, Matthew, also called Levi, and Luke. So that might have been maybe the tribe he had derived from. James, he's called son of Alphaeus, and he's also known in the list of church disciples as James the Less. In the chosen, they call him Big James and Little James. But I think they just picked this term because he wasn't as prominent as the Apostle James. And this also is not the James who wrote the book of the Bible. That was the Lord's half-brother. So that's 3 different Jameses. Then we get, I call these, really these last 3 or 4, or at least a couple here are known maybe the least. Thaddeus, he's also called Judas, so separating from Judas Iscariot. He's also called Labius. Simon the Zealot, he's the one who, the Zealots were the ones who wanted to overthrow Rome by force, but he's converted and served the Lord. And then finally Judas Iscariot, who betrayed the Lord. And we'll see his story, how it unfolds. And as we know later in the book of Acts, after his death in the first ever church meeting, business meeting, Matthias took his place. So among the list of 12 apostles now, it is Matthias. And among the requirements, I said that you had to be with him at the beginning of his ministry. So Matthias is with him at this time, only Jesus chose Judas. So did Jesus not know? Yes, he did know, but for some reason he chose him. It also says he sent the 12 out to heal the sick. So the question was Judas ever saved? We could get into a theoretical debate there, but we'll save that for another time. So we'll close that out this week. Next week, I think I'm going to devote the whole week to the Sermon on the Mount. It's in Matthew and Luke. It's not in Mark. And we'll kind of look at them and see what one has and one out the other. And ironically, as that's what The Chosen ended season 2 with last week, the Sermon on the Mount. So any questions before we go? Comments? All right, Lord, we thank you for this time together. I ask you to help us to study your word and learn from it each and every week. Bless the sermon today, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.